and Tanzania, and that was led by Francis Monyango in one of the breakout rooms. We also had another track that was on data governance for innovation, and this was led by a technical privacy advocate, that was Cephas, and he went in depth and demonstrated technical privacy by design by doing a live demo based on a client's project case used in the healthcare sector. And so, as you can see, there are some of the conversations that you're able to participate in physically in this room. Some were aired live online. I'm sure for the breakout sessions, you may have not had the opportunity to see them live, but they will be uploaded as soon as possible. Today, we have also a tight program lined up for you, very exciting program lined up for you. And we'll be having a keynote speech this morning by Dr. Melissa, followed by a fireside chat with Al Kags and Edna Kasozi, then followed by a keynote panel. And then we will have our tea break and our breakout sessions. So, by a show of hands, how many of you are here yesterday? By a show of hands, who wants to tell us just one thing that you picked from yesterday's discussion? Again, there are secret agents watching so that they can give you a gift at the end of this. I promise. You said sandboxes. I hope the secret agent has seen. And we discussed about sandboxes, and the ODPC was able to explain that sandboxes are just sandboxes, as the word is. It's a safe environment for you to try out, test out technology. And now we are moving from just having technological sandboxes to the idea of having regulatory sandboxes. Any other person wants to give it a try? Okay, it's easier to finance just one gift. So thank you very much for that response. So right about now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you Dr. Melissa Omino. Other than being my best friend, she's my friend, my best friend. She denies me on this stage. I said it live on camera. She's currently the director of the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology at Strathmore University, where she oversees the research direction of the leading Eastern African AI Policy Hub and Data Governance Policy Center, with a range of funding partners that includes the IDRC, Hewlett Foundation, Ford Foundation, and Open Air. Her research direction is focused on utilizing an African lens and a human rights lens. Part of the research conducted under Dr. Omino's leadership at CPET involved mapping AI applications in Africa as an initial step in answering the question of what determines African AI and the problem it aims to solve in Africa. Dr. Omino is also an intellectual property expert with research focused on the development and negotiation of IP provisions in international trade agreements by and with Global South countries. She has served as an advisory board member in several African and global projects that intersect between AI and IP, including a national AI strategy process and leading the IP advisory to global entity funding AI research in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, with not a standing ovation, but you can let us appreciate Dr. Omino as she takes the stage to take us through the morning's keynote. Oops.
Good morning, everyone. I am fine. That's normal. For me, I'm clumsy. So if something doesn't happen like that, then I know I'm going to have a bad day. So today I'm going to have a wonderful day. I have 20 minutes, right? 20 minutes? Thank you. So it's really an honor to be here to talk about this topic. This topic is very close to my heart. When you talk about heritage, I think about it in the context of culture and indigenous knowledge in Africa, and in particular, language. So you might wonder why language and data governance? What do the two have to do with each other? And I'm hoping by the time I'm done with my keynote, we'll agree that there's a definite link between the two. So I want to set the context And they tell you when you give keynotes that you need to reach to the audience and make them understand what you're talking about. And I think this conference is the best place to have context setting like this. We all know about the protests of the financial bill last year. Yes? This room is too quiet. I was expecting a little bit more enthusiasm because this was a moment in time that captured the world in terms of the modus operandi that the protesters took. First, it was that the Gen Z, or the youth in Kenya, stood up against a government process that they felt was not equitable, right? But the thing that was quite interesting about the Gen Z protests is that language bubbled up as an issue around access to knowledge, right? So here I've taken screenshots. I took these screenshots last year. And the first screenshot is of a popular, I need somebody to help me. What would you call Mushiri Mike? Is he an influencer? An influencer. Okay, and he was one of many influencers who were trying to create awareness as to why they were protesting against the finance bill. And what they decided to do is to translate the bill into several languages so that their parents, people who Al Kags was calling fogies yesterday, the old fogies would be able to understand why. Why are they up in arms around it? Because there wasn't enough public participation in the finance bill. There wasn't a lot of understanding in what the finance bill was talking about. So the second screenshot is of a page called Civic Rise, which had a number of influencers and also ordinary Gen Z speaking in different languages, explaining the finance bill. Now, where does CIPIT come in here? This was interesting for us because it looked at the intersection of technology, language, intellectual property, data. CIPIT is the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology Law, and we conduct research in 4 thematic areas: artificial intelligence, data governance, intellectual property, and what we call IT law. Very vague, but for a reason. And part of what we've done in our artificial intelligence work, or where we started from, was to define African AI. And we decided to also map African AI applications. And for us, African AI is artificial intelligence that is developed by Africans to solve African problems that are found on the continent. So you could be an African AI developer in Silicon Valley creating solutions for Silicon Valley, and we would not map that solution because for us, that's not African AI. The focus of AI as a tool has to be solving African problems. So the screenshot there is a map of the applications that we've been finding. It's a dynamic map. We keep updating it. So far, the trend has been updating it every 6 months. We wish we could do it more than that because applications pop up more than that. And most of these applications involve language. They involve things like chatbots. So CIPIT has been involved here in trying to understand or research what that means. We found that those who created African AI applications that involved language were conducting something called text data mining. Text data mining is a process of trolling the internet. Okay, not trolling, trolling with an A, the internet for text data. So combing, imagine somebody combing thousands of sites to find text data in order to have a data set. And it was not interesting. It sort of confirmed our views that there's very little text data in African languages that's available online. A majority of what they found in terms of text data online was translations of the Bible. And The translations of this Bible were mainly done by one religious entity known as Jehovah's Witness. And it really cemented the research gap that exists in terms of language resources online for Africans. And this led us to think about what does the African AI ecosystem then look like, and who are the stakeholders in the system other than the AI developers? Where do the linguists sit? Where do the lawyers sit? Where do data and privacy people sit? And we have a paper on that, which is the next slide. So this is a map of what we're calling low resource versus high resource languages, demarcated in regions in the world. Is that color orange? We can call it orange. Orange are low resource languages. And this basically means that the language is not available, readily available, in a format that can be used in an algorithm or a model. And you can see from this map, where is the concentration of where low resource languages are found? I can hear people from OI speaking. I don't want them to speak. I want the guests to speak. It's really easy. It's simple. You can see it. Literally, you can see it. Where is the concentration of low resource languages? Africa, yes. Where else? Thank you. And these areas have a commonality between them, right? These are areas usually defined as the global south or low-income countries. So there was a commonality about that. That's a different keynote. I don't go into that. I was just illustrating so that we can connect the dots. In the next slide, you'll see language corpora. And we've split this language corpora in trying to analyze or trying to understand how much is available as a digital corpora. Basically, that's essentially a data set that is readily available for machine language use. There's NLP tools, that's natural language processing tools. So you have to first have a corpora in order for you to develop a tool, in order for you to have a system for translation. And I picked 4 languages. I should say this data was collected by the researchers at CIPIT, together with researchers from iLab, also at Strathmore University. iLab are the data scientists, because we don't know how to do charts like this. So I picked Kiswahili, obviously, because I'm Kenyan. I picked English. I picked Xhosa from South Africa, and I picked Spanish. And I'm sure from the previous map, you understand why I picked these languages, right? So the dark pink is Kiswahili. And you can see there are 75 digital corpora that existed at the time that this data was collected for Kiswahili that we could find online, meaning that was open source, open and freely available for us to find. English had 3,902 digital corpora. Xhosa had 1. Xhosa is a Bantu language that's spoken in South Africa. And Spanish had 1,714. It follows that the tools and the machine translation systems would also drop based on the digital corpora. I like that I'm seeing concerned faces. I like it. My point is hitting home. Next, please. Okay, sorry, back one slide. So who is conducting this type of data collection for languages? We have Masahane. Masahane is an African research collective. They're based in several countries and is made up of AI researchers who concentrate highly in natural language processing. So Masahane is a very interesting case, which I'm going to get to quite soon. And in Kenya, there's also this type of research that's being conducted by Maseno University, together with other universities, including the USIU. I don't want to say USIU's full name, but I'm sure you know USIU. And they have collected language corpora under what they call Ken corpus. So for Kenyan languages, okay? And I couldn't even map them there because the data is so small. But why are these two examples important? It's because they are doing more than text data mining, okay? They're doing more than trolling the internet for language data because there's not enough. But also because Mani had an interesting case where they did go and collect the data from the Jehovah's Witness website, and they created a data set known as the JW300 dataset, but they were not allowed to use the language data by the owner of that dataset. Jehovah's Witness is the copyright owner of that data, of that text data that's found online. And when Masahane came to sip it, they asked us if they can use that language data that they found. And we found that there was a copyright notice that said they are not allowed to conduct text data mining on the Jehovah's Witness website. And this was an interesting conversation to have with AI researchers from Africa because they said these are African languages. How can we not have access to African languages? How can somebody else own African languages? Well, as a lawyer, it was easy for me to explain. They collected the language. They went and translated the Bible. A translation is a copyright work. Copyright work has ownership. So they said that they'll go to the communities and collect the data directly. I'm getting there. We're getting there. So, what is the use of having this digital language corpora anyway? Why should we go through all this hullabaloo of having conversations of intellectual property, of data sets being owned elsewhere, of trying to have these data sets in the first place? Why are we concerned about low resource languages? We're concerned because of the use of these languages, right? We're concerned because language data has specific use cases in artificial intelligence that serve us, the citizens. A good example of this is the ODPC chatbot called Linda Data. How many of you have heard about it or used it? Okay, a few of you, thank goodness. And essentially, it helps the common Mwananchi understand what is going on at the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. It was developed by Think. It is available in 3 languages, in English, Kiswahili, and Sheng. Sheng because that's the language that the Gen Z speak, or a majority of the Kenyan populace speaks Sheng. That chatbot is providing a digital public service that is crucial in what we are gathered here today to discuss, which is data governance. It is taking the concepts of data governance from high-level concepts down to the citizens so that they can understand, okay? So that's important. What happens? It happens that if you collect data in Africa, or if you're creating language data tools, it's very expensive to do that. So you'll be funded. One of the funders includes Lacuna. Lacuna is a collection of different funders, and you can see their logos there. I don't want to call them out. What's important about this is that this sets the agenda as to the intellectual property that attaches to that language data, but also the data governance framework that follows for that language data. And mostly, if we look at intellectual property, they employ what is known as the Creative Commons suite of licenses. And this is a suite of open licenses. And it differs of different things, basically the permissions that people are given. Essentially, most of these funders ask for a CC0 license, which essentially means the work goes into the public domain. There's no need to attribute. There's no need to say where you got the work from. You can copy it, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want to do with it. That's what a CC0 license is. The only caveat is that whatever you produce must also be CC0. Is that true? No. Whatever you produce would already have to be CC0 because it's already in the public domain, okay? Other than your commercial entities. They also ask for CC 4.0, which is slightly above the CC0, which essentially means you should attribute. You should say where you got the work, the copyright work from. And when I'm talking about a work here, I'm talking about the data set, because data sets have copyright that's attached to them. Okay. All this is important because there's an absence of a comprehensive framework for managing indigenous language data. Not only is it absent, it is not balanced. We are not balancing open access to language data and the benefits that accrue for those people who speak those languages. Because if you create a tool that is using African language data, the users of that are Africans. Nobody else is going to be interested in a Kiswahili language tool other than Kiswahili language, or isiXhosa, or Luo, or Luya. But the creation of these tools are being governed by others. It's creating a scenario that many are calling data colonialism. And we are saying that data colonialism does not, well, I'm trying to be politically correct. Already with the word colonialism, you understand that it's not equitable, right? It's not a framework that contains any best practice. So in building effective data governance frameworks, we need to think about three key principles. We need to think about community ownership and participation, because it's not just the AI developers who are involved here or who are losing out, it's the communities. If they're not collecting this data online, they're going into the community to collect the data. Nobody is talking about the language speakers who are literally offering their voices for this data. It also does not ensure that benefits are flowing back to language communities, which is a key principle. We have to make sure that they are benefiting. This is their entry into the AI ecosystem. And having the use of the tool is not enough of a benefit. The benefit should be for the effort that they have expended in the creation of the tool. Ethically, we also need to think about protecting the cultural intellectual property assets, which language is. We have to ensure fair representation, and we have to prevent misuse and exploitation of cultural data. My argument is that language is not equal. Kiswahili is not the same as English. Kiswahili is not the same as Kikuyu or Luo. Language as a culture is a tool that carries cultural and indigenous knowledge. There are certain people who can speak a different dialect than others in that members of that community because that dialect conveys a lot in terms of the cultural heritage of that. We can't say the same for English, so we cannot apply the same standards for African language data sets. So what are the practical implementation steps? First, we need to have a conversation about infrastructure development. Data centers. I know that's what a lot of people love to hear when we talk about artificial intelligence. Because it's not enough to say that we are going to come up with a governance framework specifically for indigenous languages, and then we ship the data elsewhere into a different data center. What I like to call zero work. So we need to think about the infrastructure. Okay? We also need to think about secure data repositories, and we need to develop collaborative platforms for researchers and developers and the community. We also have to think about policy frameworks. And I heard a lot about harmonizing data protection laws and cross-border data flows yesterday. And my one question was, what is the lens that we're using when we're talking about harmonizing? We're harmonizing with who, for what, and why? I think harmonizing between this region makes sense. But if you're harmonizing between the global south and the global north, the sense does not make. So harmonization is a key issue, but the lens that we're using to think about harmonization must be interrogated. We definitely need guidelines for ethical AI development, and we also need to think about capacity building, training for local data scientists and linguists and research institutions to foster partnerships between industry and academia. I'm over 1 minute, so I need to wrap up. In conclusion, I think that data governance is something that can be thought about broadly. We normally think about it with use cases that emanate from outside this region. I wanted to talk about language data as a use case that is prominent here, that we've seen in practice with the financial protests last year. Questions I have are, these recordings that were made, these tools that were made by the Gen Z, where are they now? Who has access to them? What has happened to that language? That is what data governance needs to be thinking about. So, to leave you with an upbeat note, the governance of language data sets represents more than just a technical challenge. It's an opportunity to shape the future for AI in a way that honors and amplifies African voices. Through thoughtful data governance, we can ensure that our technological future is built on the foundation of our rich linguistic heritage, and that we leave no one behind in the implementation of such tools. And if we do that, we would have bridged heritage and innovation. Thank you.
We can do a better job at appreciating her. Appreciate her and things she takes. Thank you. Thank you very much. So the ushers are going to distribute cards as we prepare for the next session. The next session is going to be a fireside chat. Between Miss Edna Kasozi and Al Kags. So there are cards being distributed on your table. Each table will receive a card, each table that has people on it, sitting on it. Follow the instructions on the card. Follow the instructions on the card immediately after the keynote panel. We will go and look at what everyone has gotten on their table, and we will act them out. So please be keen. You're only getting a card a table. Yesterday we tried to put cards on the tables, and I must say Kenyans are enterprising. So ladies and gentlemen, right about now, help me welcome Miss Edna Kasozi and Mr. Al Kags for a fireside chat. Let us appreciate them with a warm welcome. Let's clap for them. Okay.
Good morning. Day 2 looks good, eh? How many of you feel as good as I do that day 2 is happening? Okay, so just like 2 people. Only like 2 people. What are the rest of you feeling? Please have a seat. What are the rest of you feeling? Not so good? Okay, I'm going to ask again just to make sure. Maybe mic is not working. How many feel as good as I do that day 2 is happening? 17 more people. Excellent. I am so excited that day 2 is happening. And you know, the reason, if you look at your programs, you will realize that this was not part of the original plan. But we thought that it's a good idea to have Ms. Kasozi come and do a fireside chat because we want to hear a little bit more about Uganda. And we want to understand a little bit more about what the data governance processes look like in Uganda, what are the major challenges, and how can the rest of us move over to Uganda and go and work there, because other than data governance, Uganda is an absolutely wonderful place to be. So, Edna, welcome. I'm going to just ask you to briefly introduce yourself, just so that the people who were not there yesterday have an idea of who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm called Edna Kasozi, a Ugandan, proudly, and I'm a lawyer by profession. I work with the Personal Data Protection Office, the authority that is responsible for protecting and enforcement of data protection laws in Uganda. And I do what I'm doing because I love it. Why? I like to seek challenges, and data protection is relatively not so new, but somewhat. And because it is something that is very versatile, previously I was doing regulation, compliance, and policy development. So when data protection came along, I'm like, why not? It's something that is versatile. I'll have to take new challenges and get out of my comfort zone. Because previously it was about interpreting the law, which was there, which I know what I do. But data protection, new ideas, there is versatility, and here I am.
That's wonderful. So I'm going to start from that point. The law is fairly new in Uganda, just I think like it is in Kenya. And for the rest of us to understand, just how far are you with the implementation of the law, or with operationalizing the law so far?
Thank you very much. This law was assented to by the president in 2021. So that fairly makes it roughly 4 years.
Yeah, approximately 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. Like I said yesterday, it came in slightly post the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the implementation is hasn't progressed as fast as would be expected. One, when the government decided to digitize the economy, this was slightly before the pandemic. Of course, the side effects, everybody had some changes, adjustments made to their lives. So this implementation is something that is also still fairly, working at a slow pace, because the way it's being implemented is we want people to appreciate it, apply and appreciate instead of, implementing it as a box ticking approach. Because it's one thing to comply, tick all the boxes, but the implementation is moving at a slow pace because even the level of appreciation by the host population, by the people that it applies to, is also moving very slowly. But what can I say? The implementation is the strategy that has been implemented to kind of ensure that everybody gets to appreciate is the authority is definitely with the backing of the government is approaching sector by sector, because we know that everybody understands differently. It's one thing to have a law enacted and we know that it's in a certain language. Not everybody may understand, not everybody may have access to those laws. So what happens is sector by sector, we isolate, identify, and we customize the way we implement and, try to create awareness to a certain audience, the education sector, the financial sector, the health sector, the various sectors. Everybody is appreciating it at their own pace and with some kind of customization so that it gets to, be appreciated at that personal level. And then we believe if I know my rights as a data subject, it will be automatic that I will exercise them and they will be respected by the data collector, the data controller. So the implementation is moving slowly. That's why yesterday I said we are somewhat still crawling, but so far so good. That's all I can say. Implementation percentage-wise, I would say we're still at 35%.
I see. So if you're at 35%, and I'm going to open up to 3 questions. So if you have a Uganda-specific question, then start preparing it. But the question that I would have for you then is there are many people here who could partner with you to accelerate the process of implementation. One of the things that ODPC Kenya has done well is in working and opening partnerships with many in private sector and civil society, and that has accelerated the process of implementation, of awareness, of even operationalizing some of the aspects. So the question to you would be, if you were to look at the biggest priorities right now, what would you say they are so that the partners who are here present could feel invited to come and work with you?
The biggest priority would be awareness creation, sensitization, training. That's the biggest priority. With the limited resources that are available, the office is still small in terms of resources. We would love to partner with somebody willing to support us to create awareness, to build the capacity of people, to enlighten them, to have the law interpreted into respective languages, to customize it. You see, this is a law that applies to each and every one, irrespective of how old you are, your level of education. It touches each and every one. But you see, the law is made. We have people that have challenges. We attempted to have it done in Braille, such that we can cater to that community, for that community too. But there are other categories of people that we also need to factor in, because it's a right, an underogable right. The right to privacy is a right that everybody is accorded to. So building capacity, training. We are currently planning to have a national ICT campaign, and it's going to be the major focus. creating awareness on people's rights, obligations by the data collectors and the data controllers. So that's the biggest priority. Thank you.
Excellent. So now I'm going to open it up strictly to 3 questions. And I'm saying 3 questions because my boss, Christine, looks at me with very serious eyes and says, we are going to stick to time today. So if you have a question, then I urge you to raise your hand now. First come, first served. I have Christine, the boss, who has taken the first one. I have a hand in the middle there, and third hand is right in front of you, right there. So, Christine, over to you.
All right, thank you. And just a quick clarification and a follow-up to your question, to your call for support or collaboration. You've talked about sensitization or capacity building. Is it sensitization targeted to the citizens, or is it sensitization targeted to the regulators, or is it a general sensitization? Because something that I have realized over the years is there is sort of a rift. The policy makers and the duty bearers feel that citizens don't have a role to play in the area around data protection. So there is that challenge. So maybe just to get it from you, is it sensitization that is targeted to specific groups, or is it general sensitization to everybody? Then it would be easier to know how do we customize this sensitization aspects or material or initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, for that question. This sensitization cuts across to the duty bearers, to the citizens. It does cut across. Thank you.
Very good. I think the next question was down the middle. Yes.
Yes.
And please do tell us your name.
My name is Boniface Butichi Ingumba from African Population and Health Research Center. I have 2 questions. One is general to Africans, and another one is so specific to Uganda. The general question is that looking at Africans and their culture, the African data is communal and not individual. That's why when you go back to even our home chats and you want to ask, where is Boniface? You ask anybody and you will be directed to my place without anybody minding whether you are invading in my privacy or not. Now, in this aspect of privacy and data protection, we've been speaking to hardware. How do you plan to tackle the software aspect of data protection? Talking to the people to change their mindset and mind about data privacy. The second question, I said it's specific to Uganda, and it may look quite political, but it's a concern, especially in this space of research. We've seen that the government of Uganda, in some of the instances, it comes very strongly and opposing some of the research that has to take place. Remember, Dr. Melissa has said, whoever controls your language of discourse controls your thinking and therefore controls your end goal. So if at all we are limiting research and data in some specific fields, how are we going to control our discourse? Thank you.
You know, I'm gonna stand into your general question because of the fact that I was in a conversation literally just yesterday about whether privacy is an African concept to begin with, or how does privacy operate in Africa? Because sometimes we look at privacy in the way that it has been looked at elsewhere. But, you know, even given the example that you've used, somebody comes to the village square and says, where does Alkags live? In fact, where I live, in the village where I live, they will be brought by hand. They will be brought all the way to my house. and they will be told this is where he lives. If you think about the concept of privacy in the African context, it may have different nuances and different considerations than what we have always been thinking about. And I don't think that has been explored quite enough. And because of the fact that even the language or the trends towards which we think about these concepts of data governance, of protection, of privacy, and so on, I keep feeling are still addressed in somewhat textbook way, where, you know, Melissa says that they control the language, therefore they control the thinking, but then they also control the trends towards which we tend to think. So there are opportunities for Africans to begin to not only just change the language of the thinking, but also change the trends of the thinking to customize them towards ourselves. But I'll allow you to also take on maybe that question and the Uganda specific one.
I totally concur with you. We definitely appreciate and interpret personal data protection, privacy, like from a perspective that was, developed by maybe the West. That is why our biggest priority right now, sensitization, creating awareness, proactive access to information, information dissemination. How is this going to help? I need to appreciate intentionally what privacy, data protection is to me as an individual, my home, my work life, my personal space, before my workspace, before the business, before school, me. Because, like it or not, I don't think there is turning back to analog. We are here from the respective countries and our economies are digitized. Why? Because you want to compete in regional markets. There has to be a perfect competition, but if that space is digitized, for you to be able to break the barrier and compete, you also have to get out of your comfort zone. How do we do this? We appreciate data protection from the Western context, but then how do we appreciate it but customize and tailor suit it to suit our culture? I think that's a question that we all need to go back home with. How do we do that? Yes, there is a lot that we have to learn, but can we come up with something that is organic, that we have appreciated from my culture, that has, we have rich culture here, all of us. That is where intentional appreciation of what data protection, how do I get to benefit as an individual before I take it to my job, my school, in my workspace, in my personal space, at my home. Because, like it or not, personal data right now is one of the biggest factors you consider when you're making any decision regarding your child, regarding where you're going, how you're traveling. Personal data. Am I correct? So if we appreciate it from that angle, but then we have to intentionally, critically analyze to customize it to appreciate our rich culture. And that is where creating awareness, sensitization comes in. Because once you appreciate, you come up with, laws, policies that suit you. Am I correct? Thank you. I hope I've addressed part of the questions. No.
On the Uganda specific question.
Limited research in specific fields. The gentleman who asked this question, I would like maybe a classic example of exactly what best describes?
Yeah, when we speak majorly on the aspects of gendered research, like research on gender, we want to look at aspects of LGBTQ. When you look at it in Uganda, those spaces are very limited, and we speak to it mutedly. And yet we need that data to understand where we are and how can we then tackle some of those challenges. So at the moment we do not have that data, and that we do not speak to ourselves who we are and how we feel. And then how can we then change the mindset to think the way then we want to think as Africans? So where are we going? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, I'll go back to limited research. Why? Somebody has their reasons for making a certain decision. We need to appreciate where we are coming from to carry out this research. What is it for? What are we going to use it for? Definitely it's to benefit a certain community. But again, we need to appreciate. And appreciation comes from understanding and factoring in, the different views, like from different scholars or from different researchers, and where they are coming from to carry out their research. Again, it is appreciation of the concept and why this research is being done and how is it going to benefit all of us. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maureen, I think you have the final question of the day.
Thank you. So mine, I loved what the key panelists yesterday asked data protection practitioners that we had there, something that had to do with what is one recent data governance challenge that you are dealing with or you have experienced in Uganda, and how are you dealing with it, if you're dealing with it already? If not, how would you say the authority can be supported in that challenge? Thank you.
The dilemma question.
What dilemma are we facing right now? That's the question you wanted to ask yesterday, right?
Yes.
Wow. To best address this question, I would say the dilemma we're having right now is, as the challenge I see in Uganda is, you see, technology is advancing faster than the way we are appreciating data protection. When you look at the young generation, they get excited and they kind of adapt so fast to anything new, AI and all that technology, without appreciating and understanding the effects of the decisions they make and what they do. So we are moving so fast, and yet we don't get to pause to think, to understand what this means to us, really. That is the biggest challenge. That is one of the big challenges I see. We move on so fast from, new things. Something comes up, we get excited, we, try to understand. We don't even have to understand, we don't appreciate it very well, but we move on to the next. Now, when you people, I don't know. Nowadays, I get paranoid when I think about how much information about me is there, like how much personal data I've shared and the risks that I'm exposed to, I get paranoid. But I do not know whether people are like me. Is there somebody who gets worried and you're like, this technology is taking me so fast. I need to appreciate, to pause and understand what all this means. Is there anybody by show of hands who has that?
Yeah.
I thought I was alone. Does that happen?
We're many. Even for us Gen Zs, we also feel.
So that is the biggest challenge I see. And working with this office, definitely appreciating and understanding. And, like I'm a lawyer, but then I work with scientists. I work with technical people who make me appreciate this whole concept, cyber security, from a deeper angle. And I'm like, wow. So that is the biggest challenge. How to address it? Once again, I can't emphasize enough. You need to know. Because when you know, you make intentional decisions. You take responsibility. But the question is, do we? Because we act so fast. Yes, we move. The next, what's new, what's next?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Edna.
I have the last question, if you'll allow me. Thank you for accepting.
I've been corralled to accepting. I hadn't even accepted. I've just been told that I have accepted.
My name is Victor Kaudo from Malindi Community Human Rights Center. As the name of the organization suggests, it's a human rights center, so the question will be basing on human rights. Uganda is no longer crawling. It has started just walking the other day. At 35%, you are not crawling. Now, when I want to ask on citizen rights and protection, how is the Ugandan government handling cases where personal data is used for political or surveillance purposes without consent? Thank you.
Well, how is the Ugandan government handling that issue where personal data is used for maybe political benefit without consent? Like I said, we still have one of the biggest challenges we have is appreciation of this whole regime. We as an authority, definitely we are government, and we try as much as possible. Our position is very clear. We all know what African politics is like. So you do as much as you can. We put it out there, and the government is aware that, this is an office that needs to be respected. So misuse of personal data for political maybe benefit may happen. But as an office, we put our position very clear out there. And definitely all the time we are subject to public scrutiny and all that. But that does not take away the fact that this is a right that is underogable to somebody. So government to government, we are out to preach the gospel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edna. That was wonderful. I'll invite you back to your seat. Thank you very much. And give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. As the stage is set for the panel that is coming, I have a question. I have a couple of questions, actually. This one is going to those of us who consider ourselves Gen Zs like myself. What's the latest social media app that you're currently using? Latest social media app you're using? The one that you most recently signed up to? TikTok? So no one is on Yik Yak yet? On Yikiak? Okay. No place? Okay, so I'm the youngest Gen Z here. The second question is about this whole language, culture, blah 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 thing. Eh? What is privacy in your language? Privacy in your language. Go on. I can see you already. What's privacy in your language? We all have different languages, so just give me an immediate translation. I'm sure you all speak your languages. Tell us the language and then tell us what privacy means. Anyone? Okay, in your national language, I'll simplify it for you. National language in Faraga, does it directly translate? No, okay. In Kinyarwanda? Yeah? It's tough. It's a tough one, eh? Fine, I'll give you a simpler one then. I'll give you a simpler one. Personal space in your language. You guys are just looking at each other. Look at me and give me an answer now. What's going on? Personal space in your language. So why doesn't it exist? Why doesn't it translate? Why don't we have an actual translation for some of these words? We have to struggle, eh? We have to struggle to find it, right? So why don't we have words for these concepts? Anybody who was queued in the village knows that there's no concept of personal space. You go to a village bank, for example, and you're standing in the queue. The person who is behind you is smack dab next to you, right? They're literally, if they breathe, it is on your neck. Am I lying? See, that's how it is. Because we don't know this thing called personal space. These are things that we have. So let me ask you, for those of you who have been to your village recently, how many of you receive a call before somebody comes to your house? I'm hearing people laughing because that is ridiculous. And people just show up, right? It is those of you that live in the city that have that concept where if I'm going to come to your house, I'd better call first, isn't it? Am I lying? It's that thing that we've been talking about that. So things are moving very fast, as Edna says. Technology is moving really fast. AI has just come and accelerated everything. Everything for those of us who are at the borderline of being Gen Z and being an old fogey, we have a problem because of the fact that you wake up in the morning and the world is almost completely different. Yesterday there was no DeepSeek. Today there is DeepSeek, and now next week they will be launching ChatGPT 4.5, which is a great disappointment for the AI enthusiasts who say that ChatGPT 5 was meant to be a massive thing. So the fact that things are moving so fast, unfortunately, for those of us in Africa, we are finding ourselves in a position where we are just going to end up being consumers yet again of these products that are going to be coming from elsewhere. So the question then becomes, what are the things that we can do to leapfrog? What are the things that we can do to accelerate ourselves to catch up with this and then to move ahead? And how do we make sure that education of AI happens in our languages with our concepts? So not just our languages where we're just translating, but also with our concepts. I think Edna has a point that she's...
Thank you so much. I can't re-emphasize enough. Privacy is something that we have borrowed from somewhere. But I would like to believe that you asked what is privacy in my local language. In my local context, not my home, but I'm looking at the African tradition where I would like us to describe and define and illustrate what privacy is. Like even in the remotest setting. In your homes right now, the kitchen is separate from the dining right? By a wall. The bathroom is separate from the sitting room. You understand that concept? So when you wake up in the morning, there is that routine that you have where you tell your child, don't do this, don't disturb, don't go, don't come. You know why you do that. Some of these reasons is to preserve sanctity, privacy. So we need to appreciate, bring the principle, but customize it to that setting. The way you're training your children, the way you're training like yourselves at your home, if we customize this whole concept to our African traditions, we'll be able to appreciate and practice it intentionally instead of reading and then apply.
Excellent.
I think I've answered your question.
You have indeed. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite on stage Dr. Melissa Omino, who was already introduced to us a little bit earlier. I would also like to invite on stage Diana Mwanzia from Transparency International Kenya. I would like to invite Kip Korir Biegon from Bajeti Hub. And I would like to invite Ashabi D. Abinala from the TMC to join me up on stage. I call for names. Excellent. She's on the way. Welcome. This is the panel where we are going to be delving into some of these issues in a little bit more detail. And I think that we have an extra mic so that we can have the mic properly shared. What I will do is that I will invite you, first of all, to start by just, except for Melissa, to start by introducing yourself in the briefest possible terms so that we at least can, all of us, know what it is that you do and why you do it. Shall I start?
Good afternoon. Good. You're all attentive. Good morning. So my name is Diana Mwanzia. I work with Transparency International Kenya. I am a legal officer and I'm also an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And of course, what was the other question? Why I love doing it? Oh, there are questions when you're asked, you realize, why do I love? I generally love law and everything to do with law. Law is very wide. And the beauty about law is that every day you interact with something new. Yeah, I think that is what I love about it.
Thank you very much, Kipkurir.
Good morning. My name is Kipkurir Biegon, and I work with Budget Help. And at Budget Help, we care about how budgets are made. Of course, how they are transparent, especially made by government that way. And also equity. It's also what we do at Budget Help. Why I love doing what we do? Because I love numbers, and because numbers, behind numbers, there are people, and people can be changed by that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashadi Abinala from Tech and Media Convergency, as in TMC, and from Tanzania. I'm an active and a passionate advocate for data and internet governance. One of the things, why do I do that? I love technology. And why I like technology is that it keeps you on toes. Like there is something new every single day. And technology has so many components. We are talking about innovation, securities, vulnerabilities. So I love reading and learning a lot about that. And also hearing conversations. Like I really enjoy the topics in technology. Thank you.
Good, it works. You apparently with these mics you have to press on and then count. So I want to start you off with the easiest possible question. In as far as data governance is concerned, and I'm going to start with you, Melissa, what is the topmost priorities that you can think of? What are the things that we should think of first?
Other than what I said in my keynote.
Other than what you said in your keynote, like what should we deal with now? What's the most urgent thing we must deal with first?
I think that has really been canvassed over the last 2 days, and especially with the fireside chat that just concluded. There's an issue around sensitization, capacity building, knowledge sharing, having people actually understand what is data governance, how does it affect their lives, what's the use of it. You've talked a lot about context, right? Is the concept of privacy something that we need to explain to our citizens in order for them to understand the context? Even if it's not, they're not culturally aware of it, there's a need to understand what privacy is all about. And of course, that's me plugging myself as well as a researcher, because capacity building and training is some of the work that we do. But I think there's still a lot more work that's needed in capacity building, training, sensitization. And I really love what was said before about sectoral focus. So digesting this concept into different sectors that would make it more accessible or understandable for the citizens.
Okay, so one of the things that we should prioritize is awareness. I'll go to you and Asha and ask you the same question. What's the priority that you think we need to deal with in as far as data governance is concerned?
For me, the priority has always been responsible use of personal data protection. I think that's, to me, that's the most important aspect. How is that information being used? But the second, I would say, would be people to understand what personal data protection, what personal data means, what it identifies to. We just talked about how, as Africans, how do we define that? I gave an excellent example of how a person can just come in without making a call. I think we need that conversation so much. It never used to be a problem. Now with technology, with emerging technology, it is so sensitive and vulnerable to the extent that, yeah, security and how information is used and the subject's understanding what it means.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Over to you, Bigon. Yes, we have to put it on and count.
Thank you. So I would say was public is the center of this, like citizens and communities. So in any data that it's collected, I think they have to be at the center. They must be involved for them to be also be able to know not only just you collecting the data, but of course, even in sharing that feedback and giving back the data that you have collected, for them the people to understand why are you collecting this data in the first place. I think generally that's what should be also addressed as a priority.
Thank you very much. I'm still on the same question.
I think for me, the main priority is creating awareness, like what Dr. said, mainly on data privacy. But I'll take a different angle in terms of consenting to your information being shared to other parties, or rather being shared for other purposes that are other than the one that was initially intended. That is one thing that I've realized during within my work, that most people have a misunderstanding on what this consent needs to apply, or to the extent in which it needs to apply, because we've seen cases where we have photos taken of school children or even students in higher learning institutions. When it is intended for only for graduation purposes, they proceed to even use it for marketing purposes, and yet people are not aware that that is actually wrong for the institution to do that, because if they have consented that, yes, you can take my picture, and then the same information or same image is used for other purposes, they do have legal remedies to actually obtain from that institution.
So I'm gonna stay with you, Diana, for a minute and just ask you, because at Transparency International, I know that one of the things that you are concerned about is the question of, proactive disclosures by government. What are the things that concern you the most in that respect? Where governments are especially sharing data between departments, sometimes without our knowledge.
So, for us who are here yesterday during the keynote panel discussion in the morning, there was a mention regarding the Access to Information Act and the approaches on how you can access information proactively or in other means. So we have, actually, interestingly, we've had this discussion with some of the government agencies on how they obtain, or rather how they get the clearance of sharing this information across other agencies. You get KRA sharing our information with maybe, not the banks sharing our information with KRA, or in the NHIF sharing with KRA. The danger with that is that, one, we do not have control with what they're going to do with that information. Remember, they are using it to kind of surveil, if I can say, on who is complying with what. And in the event that you're not complying, then you are responsible to them. So maybe you had engaged with a bank, a bank transaction, and you are not compliant tax-wise. They're definitely going to come for you. But then you cannot now go and tell the bank that they're not supposed to be sharing that information, when KRA, as a government agency, is legally supposed to hold you accountable for the tax obligations. I think, drawing from all that, I think I can say we need to have a mechanism in place to ensure that this information is not misused by the agencies. Not only the agencies, I'm sure most of us within here, during election period, the election campaign period, you get information, vote for a certain MCA within your region, and you wonder, ametoa piona. So, sorry. Where he got that information from, I forget, we are a mixture.
Yes.
In terms of having these people held accountable, we need to have, in as much as we have the Data Protection Act and the Computer and Cybercrime Misuse Act, they need to have regulations in place to ensure that, in as much as they want to share this information, they need to get all the necessary approvals or consents from the affected parties. Because if they do not do that, then that, of course, proceeds to breach our own rights to privacy. Yeah, I think that is what I can say for now.
A question to the audience. How many of you who are Kenyan have gone and registered for SHA? SHA. The news. From your experience, have you noticed that they are asking a lot of questions about, those of you who haven't, one of the things that you will experience is that they will ask you whether you have a car, whether your house is a permanent house, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information that is used. What they have said is that they are going to use that information to triangulate how much you should pay. What they haven't said is that where they might share that information. So you have been telling KRA that actually, you are poor, you live in a mud house, you don't drive, you only drive on behalf of others. And then now at SHA, you have told them that you actually, drive a Guzzler and so on. So if that information is triangulated with your bank account details, which are now immediately available, with your M-Pesa account, which is now immediately available, and so on, tough times ahead for some of us. And on that note, I want to ask you, Biegon, there's a lot of data that is available from a budgetary perspective. Even the ones that were not machine readable format. Historically, there's been a lot of reports and a lot of data. We've had the budget published every year and so on and so forth. What opportunity does that present to us in two forms? One, in as far as moving ourselves into the new AI-driven world, and how can we use that to learn those opportunities, but also in as far as getting citizens to participate more in the budget making process.
Thank you. Yes, sometimes I feel, I don't know, or like it's really some confusion. Like, do we ask government too much information? Like that, sometimes government, we tend to see that they are now publishing or giving us a lot of information, which sometimes can be very confusing. Like that's the first point that probably we also need to look into, because sometimes you tend to find this information is not useful in some instances, and vis-a-vis the information that you want. But it's also on a positive note, because when you look back, you tend to find that there were a lot of struggles to find information, and of course we have really pushed this to ensure that government provide information, especially on ours, especially on budgets, like finance and all that. How much have you spent, like historical data and all that. Like even the issues of debt, which probably when we saw last year, like, and all that probably also was as a result of such things that probably the needs that are affecting communities are really pressing. And because of maybe decisions that were made in earlier years, for instance, the debt issues has been there, and of course it's piling and piling, and the pressure is piling because the services are not getting to the people. And then you look at that, I think governments first should be able to utilize their data that they produce to inform the decisions that they are making. And in that case also, they also have to involve public. Like, they're not supposed to be the only one making decisions, because we usually also say that government is not, of course, a decision-making machine, but they're supposed to also ensure that we do involve public. Because first involving public or citizens, they're the one who are the beneficiaries of the services. It's a winning proposition or buy to government. And in that case, I feel sometimes, of course, also government has been making some steps to utilize their data, on of course the data they collect, and of course the data also that sometimes when the one which sends to collect, and some times back, because they did try to ask the CSOs, civil society organizations, to also provide their data, and of course try to come up with methodologies that our data that we generate can also be used to inform decision. Because also government also have some caps in some instances. Like, because we also know that collecting data sometimes is very expensive and very costly. And there are caps that they might have, which was CSOs might do have such data. And using that data was also a plus. And I know also in going forward, probably also utilizing the AI tools that are probably available could also be able to also inform a lot of decisions. However, of course, and we have said in the morning that there are also challenges related to that. With the coming of AI, because there will be a lot of data that is generated, which sometimes, because there are also challenges that comes with that, and so things that also we need to really unpack, and when do those policies and regulations that are in place, how also do we control all sides, so that the data that is used are really going to inform the decisions that are made at the community level, because it is also what communities are able to contribute to, because as I said earlier, that government is not only the one making decisions on behalf of citizens. Like, they use data, and it's not on behalf of citizens, it's supposed to be on both sides.
Thank you very much. Melissa, I'm going to come to you and ask you, as an academic. So I think the big vague figures that are given with regard to rural versus urban is something like 70-30, and that lots of people live in rural areas rather than in urban areas. And it is also true that there are many people who are left behind academically. They don't become lawyers, they don't go to university, and so on and so forth. And so the question then becomes, when we are talking about the question of sensitization with regard to data use, data governance, responsible use, and so on and so forth, what are the ways that our academic sort of world could evolve so that a lot more people are brought into the knowledge and are sensitized about these issues, which sometimes they might look at as very, elite?
Hello. Okay. I have a three-pronged approach to your question. I think the first thing is to understand the concept of academia, which, hello?
Yes, we're still there.
Which at most times is a very elitist concept, right? So even if you think about people, especially tertiary education, let me be specific. Tertiary education, which is what most people refer to when they talk about academia, is a very elitist space, in that even accessing university spaces is quite a hassle for those of us in the global south and in low-income countries. And it might seem very far removed from the local communities that you're speaking about. But I think that recently, the research methodologies that are being used by academics, especially those who are grounded in ensuring that their research work has impact, is what we call action research. So action research is where you move away from pontificating in the ivory tower about certain concepts, but you think about how you can take those concepts and meet the community and see how you can put your research into action. We do quite a lot of that at CIPIT, which is why you'll find that we veer off from the traditional aspects of what academia would refer to as research. For example, our capacity building courses, like our data protection course, is something that will not be included if I was to, for example, apply to be a professor, right? But that's a way that I know that I'm reaching out to the community. And even that is still tiered. That's still targeting as sort of a community that is already speaking English, knows how to utilize digital tools, can go online, can do self-taught courses, etc. When it gets down to the community level, then we meet the community where the community is at. And so that involves translation. For example, we've got a lot of flack at CIPIT that we do a lot of our research in English. So we started producing research work in Kiswahili, but also we are thinking about producing research work in French as well to capture other audiences outside of Kenya who speak French. That's one. Two is about policy. If you think about policies that government comes up with, most of the time they think that the thinking, the theorizing should only happen at a particular level, but we have obligations on government about participatory governance, where they need to ensure that the community is involved. And the role of academia there is to remind them about that process of participation. So public participation, for example. We do have a public participation bill in Kenya. How far has that gone? But that is essentially meant to have the community say that this is where we are lacking, this is what we need. So for example, I know within the AI national strategy for Kenya, there was a lot of participation that occurred. You might not bring in the whole of Kenya into the room, but you can bring in representatives from certain communities and ensure that those voices are heard. Academia's role in there is to say, what does the African AI ecosystem looks like, and to pinpoint that community is a stakeholder there, right? And then finally, it really goes back to language, which I think is my topic of the day, language, heritage, culture, but asking ourselves in terms of all these concepts that we are bringing about, do they make sense culturally, and how do we then communicate that? Because research has to be disseminated, okay? And we think about disseminating through the different tiers of education, from what they call K1 or kindergarten, all the way to tertiary, and finding the specific language that makes sense in simplicity of communication, but also in accessibility.
Thank you very much. In fact, that one point about accessible language is one that worries me a lot, because especially when I attend some of these data governance things, I feel like I should have been a lawyer first, so that I have a better understanding of the things that are said there. I'm going to come to you, Asha, and ask you, and I'm going to stick with the question of responsible use of technology and therefore of data. How do we democratize that? How do we make sure that that is widespread? Because one of the biggest challenges that I think does exist is that even for accomplished stalkers like myself, people are still using their technology really badly. They're still putting the number of pictures I see on social media where, you know, Melissa has taken a picture next to her car and her license plate is very clearly seen, and on this side I can see her gate and her house number can clearly be seen and all that. That's happening a lot. But there's also even further the question of responsible use of technology, where people are sharing other people's phone numbers, so that in Kenya we have a concept of kusalimiana. If somebody says Salimia Asha, we give out your number and you will have 1 million SMSs by the end of the day from everyone. So how do we democratize the idea of responsible use?
I would like to share an observation I have, which sort of breaks the whole foundation. When it comes to data, like personal data, it is usually collected by big entities. We are talking about government entities. We are talking about corporates. We are talking about big techs. So the first foundation, which has really destroyed the foundation, is I would say is cementing the power dynamics of those in power with those with power. You find we've seen like an example globally. We've seen how the inauguration of the U.S. president, the likes of Bezos was there, the likes of Mark Zuckerberg. Do you really expect your personal data to be protected? I think that's a really bad foundation. But locally in Tanzania, I'll give an example. Our prime minister, I remember one day he was recorded saying, I have this, I can get this, I can mobilize this kind of money. I have 5 big Tanzania mobile companies. So when you have a government or leader saying that, there is no foundation of creating. Because now when you talk about, you also note secondly that the data is most vulnerable in cases where it is collected by these big giant institutions. The small organization, not too much, but the big organization, it is too much, because data is the new oil. Like that is money when it is translated to information. So I think what can be done, it becomes very, very challenging. The key stakeholders that can sort of advocate, stating how not comfortable we are with the government being on the same bed, sleeping on the same bed with those who are collecting data. I think that's a conversation and advocacy that has to be done. Like we really have to be mad, and governments should know that we are mad and we are not happy about it. That I think it is disrespectful that it is amplified. Do it behind, at least pretend that you care about us. But all the fancy display of showing your close, intimate relationship is by default showing that our data is not safe. And guys, what data don't you want people to know? You don't want people to know your bank transactions. The bank knows I'm in Nairobi right now. Maybe I swiped something at the airport, or I've swiped something here. The bank knows all my habits. Then you have the mobile companies, the most dangerous. They know everything. They know my relationships. Maybe I've not even said yes to you, but they know that Asha is showing interest here. Those are the conversation and information that we take for granted. And while when we sit here, we talk about serious issues, it is relationships that create that vulnerability. I can be very secure in protecting my data, but if my close people are not very secure, my information is not secure. So I would say that is one of them. But the second thing is, I think we need to change the narrative. The narrative, it was safer back then. When I'm not saying that the government should be an ally. When you work as a CSO, you want change. And if you want change, you need to make sure you have a person who brings on that change on the table with you. Like, how do you respectfully say no in a polite way, to the extent the person you're saying this is not good, they're happy to hear that, oh yeah, you're making sense. I think we also have to find a way to package our messages. how do we communicate with respective decision makers in the government that this is not right? And you know, I think strategies and approaches are very important. One of them is, it is very rare when I want to talk to when I have an agenda, I go to the government separately. I'll share that agenda. Maybe I'm stating, we feel like you guys are very close to the mobile companies. Then I go to the mobile companies and I say, we feel you are so very close to the government. So how are we making these strategies? Are they realistic? Do they have impact? Why not call them in the same room respectively and share? So that now the mobile companies or the data collectors or corporate companies, I'm sorry, I touch alone on mobile companies because I think the malpractice there is big. They're not the only ones. So that they get to know we are not happy. Guys, you need to discuss and see how these things are going. Now with this information and data going forward, there is a need to do that. And one of I think a successful way of packaging the messages is saying, guys, you're in trouble. As much as you like being together, the emerging technology, AI, if you be sharing information like this, even you are in trouble. So just create that separation. But the other thing is, I would say, these conversations really, really help. I think sometimes we tend to think that when you come to such a platform, like you're sort of, let me just go and tick in a box. I'm really imploring every actor who's here, and I respect everybody who's here. This is an agenda that we can carry at individual level, whether at family level, whether at a national level, and I think maybe we would get there. I know it's a big discussion, but for now I can say I think that is maybe somehow that would be a good start. Yeah.
It is certainly a big discussion, and I'm going to invite you to prepare those questions because we will have 1 or 2 rounds depending on what my boss says. But Diana, the question that I'm going to have for you is to think about the civil society. And I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but civil society is at different levels. There's the tier 1 organizations such as Transparency International, but then there's also the community-based organizations on the other end of that spectrum. How do we organize, in your view, civil society to have a bigger voice in having some of these conversations that we are discussing here, so that then we can communicate, as Asha is saying, to government in a more unified voice? Because sometimes, I think yesterday there's a government official who said, but they don't, the good thing about civil society is that they don't have one voice. They have disparate voices, and so you can play them against each other. How do we get better organized, in your view?
Thank you for that, Gags. First of all, I feel like you've placed that so high, tier 1. Okay. Regarding the engagement with, especially for the grassroots organizations, I feel like we have several mechanisms which we can all adopt. First of all, we need to have some form of open data platforms where anyone can easily access information freely. And not only that, the information also needs to be easily broken down to enable any normal person to understand without necessarily having a professional present to interpret what the information entails. So for example, if the information is in report to, I think I relate to his example on say a budget assessment report or something to do with, there was one which came out lately, I think it was there's a budget report that came out recently, which is supposed to inform now the drafting of the finance bill. Yes, thank you, the budget policy statement. So imagine now having, producing that detailed statement to someone on the grassroots level who does not understand most of the contents that's in there. How is that person supposed to now go and hold the government accountable on the details that are in there? So I feel like one of the mechanisms we can have actually is to have such information reduced in a simpler manner, which can easily be understood by anyone, so that they can also be able to have a voice to hold the government accountable from an informative point of view. And also another mechanism, of course, is to have these platforms easily accessible. When I say platforms, we have a variety of media We have social media, which I realize is not social media, Twitter, which I realized has most of the Gen Zs, courtesy of the last year's finance bill protests. You'd realize that is where most people were engaging in exchange of information regarding the finance bill, which was being proposed last year. And another, I think we have tech savvy Gen Zs. In as much as we are talking of the grassroots level, the same Gen Zs who were participating last year, remember, they are not from suburb areas. We are all across board, from rural, urban, everyone was participating. And the reason why people were able to understand this was because of the advocacy that was happening online on the media spaces, TikTok, Twitter. I'm not conversant with Facebook. I'm not sure if it was rampant there, but that is something that I realized we can easily make this, we can easily raise our voices across board easily, as long as we have access to that information in a way that we can all understand and break it down.
Diana has just betrayed her age there by telling us that she doesn't know what happens in that country called Facebook. I'm going to open it up to the questions now. And I'm going to start by still trying to triangulate, the Gen Zs in the room. Many of us, many people in the Gen Z space felt a little uncomfortable about Elon Musk buying Twitter and X, and a new one came up called Blue Sky. How many of you on Blue Sky? Okay, 1, 2 at the back, 3 at the back. Blue Sky? Okay, good. Now I know. Questions? You may raise your hand and you shall be seen and a mic shall come to you. Going once. One question right at the front here. And then one question right at the back there. You can start here and then somebody else can give a mic at the back so that we follow those questions. Any others? I'm going to take them in a bunch of 3 or 4. Okay, I see one on the second row there, and I see one at the back there. So we start here. You press it on, you count to 3.
Okay. My question is more of a comment. If you've heard that before. But it's just your reflections on the issue of desensitization on data privacy. I wanted to share, it might be important to think about collaboration and research because of the things that we've talked about of the intersection with privacy with our culture. But then I think something increasingly concerning, and maybe there could be reflections about this from the panelists, is how technology, besides it moving fast, as Edna shared, how can we not cede to technology, to machines? Like nowadays you read something and you're so upset, not just essays, but like when something is sent to you, it just looks like this was done by a machine. So the sensitization on that from lower level, because I think the data governance conversation must be part of the curriculum, because our children are now like digital natives, even if they are not just finding social media, now they are finding these tools and they are using them and actively using them in their learning. But then thinking through this research part that we've discussed or we have shared, that people do not know the nexus between private, personal, sensitive, and that happening for people who are not digital natives.
Thank you very much. I think the next question was right at the back. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Nelson from Tech Limited. My question, Charlo Tech Limited is a company that developed software solutions for different companies. For example, now we developed a solution for a company called Student Tribe that is trying to bridge the gap between the psychosocial development of kids, because mostly there's the academic sense of things, but there's also that psychosocial, the anxiety, depression, and all that. Of course, now you have your parents that you speak to, psychologists with your children and all that, and you need to protect that data because it's very sensitive data. And in developing this solution, you have to look at frameworks like GDPR, for example, to anonymize this data, not tie this personal data to a particular entity. And now my question would be, there is that essence of AI and technology progressing in the African market, but we don't actually have a data governance or framework like the GDPR to base our conversations and basically the building of technology on top of this framework, and in a sense prevent, data being shared between different entities. So this would be mostly to someone like Diana. How would civil society in Kenya in general, just East Africa, create such a framework that we can adhere to, and also, find such companies like, let's say, the big telcos if they share this data?
Excellent. I know that at one point I had the same question or similar question in terms of what would a unified framework look like for the whole of East Africa. So it would be interesting to hear Diana's view on this. Third question is over there.
Thank you. Two questions. One to Asha. I'm curious to hear about maybe one or two lessons that you think Kenya and Uganda or other countries within the East Africa region can learn from Tanzania when it comes to implementation of issues to do with data governance and data rights. So I'm curious about that. My second question is to Dr. Melissa. So I totally am a big advocate of translating language translating concepts into local languages so that then everyone is on board and no one is left behind. But one of the things I personally struggle with, and perhaps it's a bias, is the fact that whereas we put all these energies and resources into translating language, and most of the time it is written text, the reality on the ground is that very few of us can read local languages. Let's not even go to Swahili. Unlike our friends in Tanzania who can literally read Swahili, in Kenya, we say Swahili is our national language, and it is, but very few of us can read text in Swahili. So I always find myself struggling with what is the real impact of translating language into text versus, is it time we start thinking about speech? Would speech, translating language into speech, be an easier route where we put resources and there's impact, as opposed to text because of the ability to read amongst the various audiences? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the question is right back there. Yes.
Morning. My name is Pirine. I'm from the Africa Data Leadership Initiative at DIAL. I have a question that actually relates to infrastructure, something I've been thinking about for a long time, and it's an open question. I remember a few years ago doing a thesis on this idea of data colonization. I was looking at a connectivity initiative, basically, by a big tech platform. And what was interesting for me was that it was actually a situation where, because of infrastructure failings or a lack of delivery, people were put in a position of having to use their personal data as a currency for connectivity. And it's something that's really haunted me ever since. I mean, every time any of us are in the airport and we're just quickly getting a Wi-Fi, you know, we're all in that situation. My question is, what can data protection authorities do about this conundrum or this dilemma where platforms have basically vertically integrated the entire connectivity value chain and it's putting people like us, you know, at risk? Is this something that falls within the ambit of data protection authorities, or like what can be done in a situation like this that so many African countries actually are facing right now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 4 questions, and I think we'll just go from your end, Melissa, and just come this way.
Hello. Okay. Before I answer the question, I have a burning thing that I need to address, which is the phrase about data being the new oil. I know it started yesterday, and I was seated in the audience, and I said, okay, I'm going to hold my tongue. But now I have the mic. Data is not the new oil, because data does not occur in a vacuum. Data belongs to people. It's your data, right? So people should not think about data as the new oil, because then it really links directly to mining and data extraction. So you really have to think about data not as this commodity that hangs somewhere in the air, but that is actually connected to individuals. So I just had to say it. I'm so sorry.
Thank you so much for saying it.
It burns me every
It
time I
has
hear
it has at least extinguished the fire.
Yes, it
Very
has.
good.
We normally have a running challenge with Andrew Renz. I don't know how many of you know Andrew Renz from South Africa. And Andrew says data is the new fish. If every time you think about saying data is the new oil, think about you saying data is the new fish, right? Because you can go fishing, right? Into the lake with a net and capture fish, but it doesn't make sense. Data is always connected. Data comes from somewhere, which is connected to people. Okay, I'm going to answer the one that was directed to me first from Lois. Okay, I agree with you. There is a big issue around what does it mean to make these concepts accessible, right? And in Kenya, we have an issue about Kiswahili Sanifu. Our Kiswahili is not Sanifu, it's Kiswahili, I don't know what to call it, right? It's not even Sheng. Sheng is a different language on its own. And I was getting there. And that's why in my keynote, there was that specific example of Linda Data, which actually has Kiswahili, English, and Sheng. And Sheng is utilized quite a bit. And Sheng is also dynamic, it changes. So you can have Sheng that I used to speak when I was a tot that now has changed. I don't know what people say when they speak now. It's a completely different language. So an example about text to speech is that text to speech can be done. It's expensive, right? Because we have to do voice recordings. Then how do we ensure accessibility of people to devices where they can actually listen? A great example is something that we heard. Okay, maybe it's not a great example, but an example we had is researchers going into communities and collecting voice data from the communities and then depositing the voice data in sort of like machines, etc., where communities can go and listen. But that is also expensive, and I also think that might be extractive because of the open source that then falls on those devices. And also I have big qualms about collecting voice data, because my perception is that voice is a personal identifier. And then now we cross back into the realm of privacy. But what we do is we try and get to the community according to the way that the community will understand. So LDRI, for example, have done this, Local Development Research Institute, when they go to farmers to speak to farmers about farming practices, they speak to them in a mixture of English, Kiembu, Kikuyu, which mixed in the way that the community will understand. So it doesn't have to be text that is Kiswahili Sanifu. It can be Sheng. It can be the broken Kiswahili that we have here in Kenya. As the whole idea is that the goal is to have understanding and communication. So that's my answer there. On the question about personal sensitive data, the psychosocial sensitive data, from Nelson. I want to ask Nelson a question. Is Nelson there? Nelson, which jurisdiction are you from? You're from Kenya. Okay. And this is me going to go on a rant again. I promise this is my last one. I think there's an over-reliance on the GDPR. There's also a false communication that the Kenya DPA is exactly like the GDPR. It is not true. I think there are concepts that will remain the same in different jurisdictions, but if you look at the DPA, which is the Data Protection Act in Kenya, it is different from the GDPR. The GDPR is not the king of data protection law and governance. So I would ask you to look at what the DPA says. And the DPA says a lot about localization and cross-border data flows, and especially of personal sensitive data. So the answer is already there. You don't need to have another framework. The framework exists. The question is the framework working? I think that's a question that we should ask. And then how do we operationalize the framework that exists? And I do know from yesterday we heard that there would be an East African office that's looking at how we can exchange data or harmonize, but it's not that you can't move data. Data is moving according to the DPA. It's just people understanding how to do it. And I really want to dispel this idea of looking elsewhere for frameworks. We can make frameworks here, and they exist. Maybe we need to operationalize them. Maybe we need to sensitize people. Maybe we need to have capacity building. Yeah. So I'll leave.
And I'm going to stay on your rant for a minute, just for my edification to understand. To what extent do you think that as East Africa, the various laws that exist unify our approach to data governance? Because if East Africa is unifying our approach to trade, for example, then to what extent are we also unifying our approach to data governance in general?
That sigh is for you, Al.
Thank you. I
think
appreciate
that-
the sigh.
I think that we have to ask ourselves, what do we mean when we're saying we're looking for unification? I understand the concept of trade, but regional recs already exist, right? We also have the AFCFTA that's already talking about unification of trade. It also has different annexes that deal with intellectual property. I know there should be one that deals with data governance as well, okay? So my question is to throw the question back at you. What isn't working within the frameworks that already exist? What isn't working, so that we can say, this is not working, let's now build something else that will work? Is there a hindrance for the movement of data between Kenya and Tanzania? Is there an example of a hindrance of the movement of that data?
I think the biggest discussion that has been there has been where, for example, in the case of WorldCoin, if you remember, where big tech would come to one country, find that the laws or how the laws are applied in one place would prohibit it from being able to, or would inhibit it from being able to participate in that space, and therefore then move to a different jurisdiction in the same rec.
Thank you for bringing up WorldCoin. It was also brought up yesterday, where it was the Tools of Humanity case. And in that instance, you're telling me somebody who wants to have access to personal sensitive data of citizens in this jurisdiction is having a hard time because there are frameworks that limit how you can access that data. And that is what the framework is supposed to do.
Yes.
Because who are you and why do you want to take this data outside?
Yes.
I think here the issue is two-pronged. We are thinking about how do we participate in the space of trade, okay, where we're actually not gaining, somebody else is gaining, and how also do we protect personal sensitive data? Because WorldCoin was collecting iris,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not that they failed, they collected.
More than 300,000 people, yes.
They did. So they didn't fail. They collected, actually. The case is still ongoing, so maybe as a lawyer, I shouldn't comment further than that. But what I do know is that the issue of if you're thinking about unification in order to make it easier for other businesses to operate on personal sensitive data, then our priorities are wrong. Then we have to ask ourselves again, why do we have data governance? Why do we have the distinction between personal sensitive data and other data? Also, what is the aim of open data? Is open data meant only to facilitate trade, or is it supposed to facilitate other things that includes upholding the concept of privacy, which is a constitutional right? So again, my question is it that the frameworks don't work, or the frameworks make it difficult because of the concept of privacy? And so in order for you to be able to trade in it, if you are going to trade in it, then you have to meet certain thresholds that are there for a reason. And meeting that threshold does not mean that there's no framework. The framework exists.
Excellent. Asha?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, the lessons. I would like to declare, as patriotic and passionate as I am about my country, yes, there are lessons there, but I would like to declare that I'm not yet happy with how the state is. Like, I would like to declare that before I share. So what can Kenya and Uganda do? So one of our observations that we had is, as Tanzania, we were a bit behind when it comes to CSOs in advocating all ICT related aspects for humanities, especially in the area of digital rights. I don't want to say just in data governance, ICT related, whether it is accessibility of internet, whether it becomes to information integrity, whether it has to do with literacy, and now when we go now to data governance, that's a whole other story. So identifying that, one of the core reasons and inspirations behind tech and media convergence is addressing that gap. So one of the things we've done, and it saddens me to say that I think Kenya and Uganda have done a very good job in these agendas compared to us. And when I say a good job, I mean in the lines of timeline. That this conversation started a long time ago at local context in Kenya and Uganda compared to Tanzania. We are doing it right now. And if I acknowledge the weakness, that means we are going to work on the weakness. I don't want to be all proud and say that we've been the same. No, we've been having this conversation for the last 3-4 years. I've been in this space for the last 15 years. I've been traveling and engaging to these discussions the last 15, maybe 12 to 15 years, both in Kenya and Uganda. So I would like to also acknowledge that. But in the last 4 years, and I'm not saying that we don't have organizations that address these issues. When we talk about organization, we also have to acknowledge, congratulations being the tier 1, by the way. We also have to acknowledge that there are tiers in organizations. For my country, I would say we have like 4. We did a brief study, like our own internal organizations. So we did a brief study. There are 4 tiers, as in those who sub-grant, you then you go to those who are, maybe they don't sub-grant, but they have funds on programs that can run them for 2-3 years. Then you have those that do by activity, any activity basis. Now you find that there are organization and activities that are being done in silos and sometimes not sustainably. And that narrates to the fact that maybe those organizations do not have human resources, but also it is not in their strategy. Somehow how you work reflects what your strategy is. If you don't have a strategy, this agenda of advocacy becomes an activity. All ICT-related advocacy becomes activities, not agenda. And you cannot get anywhere with activities. You tick a box and then it ends there. So yes, what can be done? One of the, identifying our challenge, one of the things that we have done as TMC, we are really, really setting ourselves and working so hard to make sure that we are that organization that is consistently addressing the agenda. And to be able to do that, my brother here, the first contributor, talked about collaboration. You know, unfortunately, we use collaboration as a fancy word. You know, we want to be acknowledged that, yeah, me, I collaborate. But guys, I think we need to go back. Think about it. How are we collaborating? Are we just talking about collaboration? What are we looking at collaboration? Because normally, when I come to you and I say I want to collaborate to you, normally it has to do with money. Maybe I've seen you've got some funds now. I want to collaborate with you. That is not collaboration. I think, by the way, collaboration that is fund oriented shouldn't be identified as collaboration. For us to understand that collaboration is about exchanging expertise and making sure we're driving towards impact. So as TMC, we know that TMC cannot get anywhere as an organization, as a single CSO, a single organization. We created a platform as an Internet Governance Tanzania working group. And the whole agenda, it is integrated in our strategy. And the whole agenda was to make sure now we also catch up with Kenya, Uganda, and the rest of the world to make sure now we have a consistent mechanism of addressing, talking about these things. The other thing that can be copied, maybe I've talked about a CSO, yes. The other thing which can be copied, I wish it was easy to say, could Kenya and Uganda have a single one language? We have Kiswahili. I don't want for us to underestimate that. It is very powerful. So I think we'll catch up because we have Kiswahili and you guys have so many languages. I have hope. The other respective ministry, the ministry is doing very well to be a respective ministry, as in TCRA. They have awareness programs. They're consistent and they're very good and they're simple in both languages, Swahili, Swahili. The campaigns are so very consistent and they've thought about it very well. And most of their programs are youth oriented and universities. They have these competitions. So you bring on a competition. You know, when it is national level and it's a respective authority, you find that maybe 300, 600 students have applied, but they only need 3 winners. I love such competitions because the 600 are aware now. When it comes to respective authorities on laws as well, I'm so happy. I think this is an East African thing. You know, somebody has borrowed money from there and they got your they've taken the whole phone book of contacts. Then they'll send a message, oh, so and so has done this, so and so. So right now, those people are being held accountable in Tanzania. And I would say it has been active, if I'm not mistaken, for the last 4 to 5 months. I've seen results of maybe five of them being held responsible. I think that is an excellent example of where you can go to a Tanzania who doesn't want big words and tell them, you see now when personal data protection, how sensitive Nani data is, that has been really easy to give an example. One last one. Because of the tiers, we are not a tier 1. We are hoping to get there. But we have identified that we need capacity building to CSOs. For 2024 and 2025, for 2025 and 2026, TMC hopes to reach 800 CSOs. We are doing capacity building on data governance for NGOs. It is a 2-day training, virtual training, forwards the maximum a day, and we are doing it. The organization has to apply, and all they have to do is participate there. We have the expertise, we have the mechanisms, we have the infrastructure, and that is how we feel like we can contribute to the ecosystem. And so far for this year, we have already done something like 73 or 76. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you had one of the questions that you wanted to touch on. Okay, carry on.
Thank you. This is the question that was asked about technology and how it bridges the gap between the communities and of course what we are dealing with right now here. So sometimes you observe and see what communities are doing, like the way they engage with data is, of course, it might be at lower level. They might even understand what AI is all about, but you still need to bridge that gap. So what we have done was we have asked them, let's say they wanted to map out the services, access to services in their communities, because they can be able to draw the map and be able to kind of identify and say. But then you bring in the AI and all that, like bringing in what the data shows from maybe from GNPs and all that. Meaning, it should serve all of us in that sense. And another question which I also wanted to contribute was the one on whether CSOs speak in one language. I think over the past few years we have been able to speak in one language, and that's why some of the things have been able to move. And then we see some, for example, as is budget gap, we have trained, let's say, budget facilitators across all the 47 counties. So we don't expect, of course, even like let's say Transparent International does not, they just use our budget facilitators. Same case, we'll also use what they already have. So we usually collaborate, and we're able to advocate for things that in one voice. And I think that we have done that over the last few years that we have been in this space. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, I think I'll address Nelson's question, but I think also Dr. has done a good job in addressing his question. But just to add or to emphasize, yes, we do need to ask ourselves one question on the implementation status of the laws that we currently have. The Data Protection Act, the regulations tied to the Data Protection Act, we have Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. We have beautiful legislation in place, but what we need to actually ask ourselves is, how is the implementation like? And for us to be able to answer to that question as CSOs, we have two approaches to that, which I can propose. One, we can participate in some of these bills which are in place, which are supposed to bring in more clauses, or rather to change other clauses within these existing acts. So for example, right now we have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Bill, Amendment Bill 2024. I think right now it is still in the process of being, comments are still being submitted to the Parliament through the ICT committee. That is one avenue which we can all come together as CSOs to scrutinize that bill, to see if it addresses the concerns that we are actually raising within this conference, and have the same submitted to the committee for their inclusion in the law. So that in as much as we are saying that implementation is an issue, which it is, we also need to make sure that it speaks to the existing challenges that are in place. Another thing that we can take as an approach as CSOs, we can also do research. We can, of course, to use your term, collaborate with amongst each other to conduct a joint research and see or analyze the impact of the laws that we have currently that speak to data protection or data governance, so that whatever report we are able to generate can be able to influence the policymakers to make the necessary policy reforms that shall address the issues that we are discussing right now. Now, to the East Africa level that you had mentioned, the research will also work in a way that if we collaborate with CSOs across the region to have one research conducted to be able to address again the issues on data governance. Before I forget, the EAC Treaty does have a provision that allows CSOs to submit their reports or recommendation proposals to the East Africa Legislative Assembly. That is actually provided for. And we have taken that up. We have actually used that channel where we did collaborate with, we have an East Africa Civil Society Organizations Forum, which is based in Arusha, Tanzania. We do collaborate with them to be able to come up with some of these policies. So for example, I'll use one policy which we, not as transparency, it was with another organization, where we were able to influence the development of sexual SGBV policy at the regional level, and we were able to work with the East Africa CSO within Arusha, which actually brings together most of the CSOs across East Africa to be able to raise one voice and tell the Yala people that, hey, we need this policy or we need this law in place. The only challenge that we have with Yala that I've noticed, I don't know how we are going to go about it, is the political goodwill. The heads of states are the ones who are supposed to sign in this bill to make it law and for it to be implemented across East Africa. So once we have the challenge sorted, then we'll be good to go. Because currently we also have the East Africa CSO bill. I'm not sure if it has still passed, but basically that bill is supposed to give CSOs across East Africa the freedom to operate without interference from the government. That, of course, is supposed to cover Sudan, DRC, Rwanda, all East Africa countries. But the challenge we're having right now is, where is the political goodwill? Yeah, I think that is what I can say.
Thank you very much. I have a note here from my boss who says that I will not have tea because we are out of time. And so I want to thank, first of all, the panelists for the great ideas that you have shared with us and for the generosity of your minds. And to all of you for your attention, asante sana. I think I'm going to hand it over back because I think they have gifts for the panelists. And I think it is gold nuggets, if I'm not wrong. You know, something significant like that. So I'm just going to hand it over back to Christina, to Philip, to guide us.
Thank you very much. Let's appreciate them. Let's appreciate them. You can have your seats. We will find you because gold is quite sensitive. So we don't want to give you those gifts here. Someone might, there might be is a camera recording. I will not say. So thank you very much for that session, CAGs, and the panel that has participated in that. Truly informative. Right about now, I know most of us are hungry. I've seen some of us doze off. So we will not keep you here much longer. But just for housekeeping, we have the third breakout session of this 2-day conference. And the third breakout session is happening immediately after the tea break. And the first track is on data sharing and collaboration. This is a launch of the report, Africa Sandboxes Outlook, Thinking Outside the Box for Responsible Innovation in the Age of AI, Support Community Building of Data Governance Experts Interested in Sandboxes. And initially, this was supposed to be held in Twiga Hall, but there is a change and that will be held in Kiboko Hall. So remember, right after the tea break, we will move straight into our breakout rooms so that we're able to save time. So straight from your tea break, head into Kiboko Hall for that session by DataSphere Initiative on data sharing and collaboration. If you're here yesterday, they did a very good job in marketing their panel. Maureen did a very good job, so probably you'll also see me there. Track 2 is on data governance for sustainable development. This is by Kiktanet, a roundtable discussion. And the topic they're handling is building bridges, harmonizing data governance frameworks for regional integration in East Africa. And that discussion will be right here at Tembo Hall. And so just have your tea in the shortest time possible. Again, we have already started running out of time. So if you can do that in 15 minutes, and then the ushers will usher you into the various rooms. Kiktanet is having the roundtable discussion here at Tembo Hall, and DataSphere Initiative will be having their panel discussion at Kiboko Hall. Thank you very much for being attentive. We may now leave and go and have our tea. Thank you so much. Also, one last announcement is that there are a number of booths or exhibition stands out there to your left on your way to the tea area. I'm assuming it's out here. So please take some time to also see the organizations that have set up out there and what they do, and also engage and interact with those booths. Thank you.